All right. Well, welcome to the June IEA GLR Midday Cafe. We are grateful you're here wherever you're joining us from. It's been fun to see many of you have dropped in where you're calling in from today. So feel free to do that. It kind of helps. And you might even find someone who's right next to you that you didn't know was an Enneagram lover as well. And so we just want to share with you really the big community event that's going on now in the IEA world that we're gearing up for is this premium online event. The IEA Global Conference is July 16th through the 18th. And so if you have not registered, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for that, but we would love for you to connect in that way. And our guest today is actually even going to be a part of that. And Claire and he will talk a little bit more about that so you can connect a little deeper with him after today's call. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I am going to just ask that you put yourself on mute while we're recording so we get a nice clean recording. We do put this on our YouTube channel and we'll be sharing it out in social media so that others that aren't able to join us at this time are able to see the replay. And so just know if you share, you're sharing with the global community here in the social world. But there is a feature down at the bottom because we're going to have some time for question and response. If you click on the little reactions button, there's a place where you can actually raise your hand. And so feel free to raise your hand. It'll put you in queue. And that way we make sure, even if you're on another screen, we'll be able to see that you are wanting to add something to the conversation today. So welcome to the cafe. And again, we're glad you're here. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Clare Lowridge. Clare is our IEA GLR president. And she will launch us out today as we dive into this great conversation with Milton Stewart.
So hello, everyone. And I'm just grateful to see really good friends on this call. And some of our board members, just give a wave here and let folks know that you're on the board. And we're waiting for a few of our dear ones who might have forgotten it was Eastern time. So I just sent out a note. I knew you were coming. I baked a bundt. Where are you at? Anyway, how many people are old enough to remember that commercial? Well, why don't we just take a moment and settle in and find a way just to be present to this gift of right now. And so however you do that, I put my feet flat on the ground because I'm an Enneagram style that is always moving forward, and I need to feel my feet flat on the ground. And then I'm going to begin to take a couple of breaths here, and I invite you to do the same. Just breathe in the way that helps you to remember yourself. And even maybe dropping in a little bit and asking yourself, why am I here today? What is my desire? Why did I show up on this call? And then even with yourself on mute, maybe you could say out loud what your desire is in this time together. And then just allow yourself to come right to the screen of this group of people who've joined together, and see if you can't just welcome the people that you may know nothing about, and some that you already know something about, but you might want to let that preconceived idea go for a minute, and just welcome each of us here in a moment where we are not the same as we were yesterday. And we are not who we will be tomorrow. And so if we continue to keep doing this work of becoming ourselves, then we might even open up to something brand new. and say, wow, I didn't know that about me, or wow, I'd love to welcome that part of me. And Milton is a guide, I think, that can, help us move in that direction as a career coach. Studied with one of our favorites, Ginger Lapid Bogda, as Enneagram in Business Coach. Milton and I met at the Train the Trainer training. So we spent a couple of weeks together and actually had to work on a few projects and help someone named Sandy find her way to get fired or to reposition herself. So that was a lot of fun. and Milton is brand new to the IEA Global Board. So let's welcome him for taking that position and being willing to help that, that group do the work of helping people discover and recover their lives. And so with that, we have really great information. Milton's going to be speaking at the global conference for the first time, and he's partnered up with one of our favorite fives on the planet, Dr. Jerome Wagner. And so we know that that's just going to be a brilliant look at what are you going to be talking about, Milton?
So I'm going to be talking about head types, 5s, 6s, and 7s.
Ooh. Anybody's curiosity piqued? Yeah, because they can keep us curious, can't they? Those 5s, 6s, and 7s. Go ahead, put your hand up on your screen if you're a 5, 6, or 7, unless you prefer to stay in the shadows. We respect that too. And then I love the name of your business. It's a Japanese name. And would you give us the pronunciation and tell us how you came to that name?
Yes. The name of my organization, my company, is Kaizen Careers Coaching and Consulting. And the reason I chose Kaizen, I found it in college. We were in my business classes. We were talking about like Japanese automotive and how to make things better and kind of their philosophy behind the way that they did things. And Kaizen was the word that they used, which means continuous improvement. And that stuck and resonated with me so deeply in college. I was like, that's my word. This is my word. There's some words we find that kind of encompass something that's deep within us that we're like, oh, I love this word. It really sticks to me. So continuous improvement, the word Kaizen has really just resonated with me before I knew the Enneagram all the way up till now.
Yeah. And so that leads me to say, how did you find the time as a 7 to do the deep work of the Enneagram, and who introduced you?
So this is a tricky one. That was a great question, by the way. So I'll start with the latter question. So I found the Enneagram through a young adult minister we had at our church like 12 plus years ago. And we were eating, I was stuffing my face with food as a self-praised 7 normally would do. And he was like, who wants to take a personality test? And we were like, yeah, sure. I love those things, right? We're in a group of people, we're at a Devo, so we're just eating. And obviously, as we know now, this is way more, and it's not a personality test. But then, that's what it was to us. And so he brings out the Wisdom of the Enneagram book, and we take the 2-question test. And I get my letter spot on. And so what he does in our group, he just reads like the first paragraph, which I'm like, yes, that's right. I am a 7. I like this. This is good. Then he starts reading the next 2 paragraphs, and I start feeling really, really like seen in a way that I didn't want to be seen and didn't know someone saw me that way. I was like, oh my goodness, how do they know? How does this book know this about me? Oh my goodness. So now I'm in the midst of this group of people trying to look normal, but feeling extra out of ordinary. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. That's interesting. I've just never thought about that. So I'm just moving around, but inside I'm like, oh my goodness, it has me pegged so well. How and why? And that intrigued me. So when something can really peg me as a 7, like, and slow me down and catch me, now I'm really intrigued mentally. And so that went to me grabbing all the books I can get at the time, right? And start to like read and learn and learn more, and then mistype the people closest to you, because that's the next step that you do, because you don't really know the Enneagram. But so I went through that process. which is a big part of how I came to the Enneagram. And now, how do I get to actually doing the inner work? This part of it is so intriguing to me myself, because I literally was with my Enneagram coach yesterday, because I coach, but I make sure I doing my work. So she asked me to list all the things that I'm doing now. And this list just kept going. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, I feel embarrassed right now. Like, this is too much. So one of the things is that I really focused on, first thing is like, there was like only 2 or 3 podcasts back then about the Enneagram. Now it's like a bunch. But I listened to podcasts, I read books. And what I did was I really focused, as a 7, I really focused on how do I get in touch with my emotions. That was the first way that I really did that. And so that's how I got to the inner work. On top of that, I think it was divine intervention as well, because I worked at a place that I didn't think I was going to work at. So I worked at a elementary school, and I didn't know it was going to pull on my heartstrings the way that it did. And it helped heal me in a lot of different ways. And it helped to work through my 7ness, because some of the kids' situations, I can't rationalize it. It's so bad. Things are so, I can't rationalize it. And so that really challenged me internally. And so through those different things, it really helped to kind of help me to truly start to really do my inner work so I could develop.
Yeah. And, for a 7 to do inner work and to continue to drop the plow, you haven't just studied with the business folks. You've gone and sat with Jerry Wagner and some of those other psychology types who might just, say, okay, we're going to drill down into that now. And so I just want to say that we trust that the way that you're going to guide us in this time is not from a place of having arrived, but a place of saying, I'm curious and I recognize I'm doing the work and I want to keep doing the work. So thanks for that, Milton. And, if I were to say, the way I love the Enneagram is through the Harmony Triad model. And as you know, that's what our book is on. And I would say that your 4 is showing, and that, the willingness to go into the depth of your heart and allow that kind of work to talk about the difficulty and the pain of life. Those are the kinds of people we want coaching us and guiding us. So you have us here. And then the next thing I want to say, and I wish Danielle was here, but or actually Darlene too, but we've been talking about, Danielle's here.
I'm here.
She's here. One of the things that we've been talking about on our board is what our intention is, and then what our impact is. And they can be 2 very different things. We can intend in a particular way to show up in the world, and then discover that our impact is something completely different. So I'm wondering, when you said the other day, I left it wide open. What do you want to talk about, Milton? You could talk about emotional safety, because that was one of the projects we worked on, your team with Ginger. And, oh no, I want to talk about what are you going to talk about? And then launch right in, my friend.
Yes. So today I want to talk about the impact of instincts. And I think sometimes instincts don't get the focus that they really need. And I'll explain that some for sure. So when we talk about instincts and why are they important, one of the things is that they're the animalistic part of us. And that's what we have to remember. So sometimes we may approach the animalistic parts of us in only a psychological type of way. And that's not really that helpful or beneficial, because this part of us is to a degree animalistic. So it has its own way of really being strong, or possibility to be rogue in a sense, or to not even show up at times. And so we really have to be careful of how we're really working with that. So when we think about it, it's kind of like if you're looking at someone who may be an addict, someone who may be in an AA program. it is extremely important. We can't just think you out of it. We can't just find a great solution, great theory to get you out of the addiction or whatever you're struggling with. We have to physically remove, a lot of times, you from that, whatever that addiction is. So whatever that is, so whatever it could be, we have to create physical distance between that, because psychologically we can rationalize our way through all these different things, but the dominant instinct will take over and we will be right back into that addiction of whatever that addiction is. Okay. So it's very important for us to really start to look at it. What is the environment doing to impact the person or the culture or the people, right? So if we're looking at that, we have to approach it with a different lens, especially behaviorally. We have to approach it from a standpoint of like, okay, so the kids that I work with at the elementary school, we can teach all the great things and like instill like these wonderful new type of ways of like processing things and their emotions and how I deal with stuff. But guess what? If their environment is going to constantly create that same negative impact that it does when they go back home, it's like they hit the reset button when they come back to school, because that environment, nothing changed in that environment that just drove a dominant instinct that impacted them. So looking at those things, even when we're thinking about instincts, is going to be very important. The next part about it is, and this is, I get this from CP Enneagram, which is Beatrice Chestnut and Urania Pius, and I agree with this. For the most part, even though our type structures are at play, I think our dominant instinct really runs what we do most, like most people. Like if you haven't really done the work, I think it runs most people a lot of times. And so we're so used to seeing it that we don't catch it. And I'm gonna go into that in a little bit of like how it shows up for each one of us, but we're not catching just how our dominant instinct is running our day, running our culture, running our society, and then running different parts of our world. And so when we're not catching that, it just goes by and it keeps going on and on and on. And it creates a systemic issue. Okay. So these are things that we're having to like truly be able to create and catch as we really think about instincts. So one of the things is, at our instinctual level, because it's animalistic, we are the most dangerous. This is where it gets really tricky. And so now we're talking about, when we talk about the impact, at the instinctual level, we're the most dangerous. If you really think about your dominant instinct, when it has gone awry, if you've noticed it, you really feel like internally that you are completely correct in whatever you're doing at that moment. You really have to take a step back, like breathe, pause, allow your brain and heart to come back online, right? And your body, so you can be present to really realize like, hold on, I don't think this decision that I'm about to make or that I'm in, like it's actually a really beneficial one that's fruitful. I'm not, because when the instinct takes over, we really don't, we like block out everything else. Okay, really quick example to try to bring it home, make it a little bit more sticky. One thing is, when it comes to, I'm self-praise dominant. So when it comes to food, there was an event where there was some extra food left over. And even though I had 2 plates already, right? I had already put back 2 plates that I was hungry. Even though I had 2 plates, part of me still believed that the extra food there, that I needed to get it, even though no one, I said, I need to put it like under my chair so that I can be ready if I'm hungry for the rest of this conference. And like everything inside of me was saying that that was the right thing to do. Now, the food that was left over was salmon. And so in my mind, this is crazy, right? I see a coffee cup and I see salmon, and then I see my chair. I'm like, oh my goodness, maybe I should put this salmon in this coffee cup and put it under my chair. If that is not a horrible idea to sit somewhere for 4 hours and have a smelly piece of salmon under your chair while you're sitting there listening to somebody teach, that does not make any sense when I step back and really think about it. But at that quick little short moment, I really felt in my body that it was completely right to make sure I get this fish and I put it in this cup to preserve it for myself, as if I didn't already have money to eat afterwards, as if there wasn't any snacks, if I didn't have people in the room who had snacks, who would even share those things with me. The instinct of self-preservation had taken over in that moment, purely just taking over. And so this is like a really funny example because I had to really calm my instinct down. I was like, Milton, what are you doing here? Like, no, let's not do that. It's okay. It's okay. So I had to really think about that. But when we think about that at a different level, say, for instance, down when the ice storm was in Texas, when self-preservation takes over, it gets really dangerous. I don't care about anybody else who may else need water. I'm just going to get water I need. I'm not from Texas, but this is how that self-preservation, I had an actual example from someone in one of my classes that talked about this. Like people literally like, no, it's all about me. So I don't care if I have enough, I'm going to get even more. I'm not thinking about anyone else, you know? And so this is where it gets a little dangerous, right? Or I'm selling water, you know, but I'm going to raise the price up, even though people need it. I'm going to raise the price up because guess what? I'm just worried about getting what I need personally in this situation. All of our instincts have a way of doing this in different ways, and I'll give some examples, but I just wanted to drive that home and make it sticky. It gets dangerous. Our instincts, when they take over, they become dangerous because we completely think we're correct in the situation. That's the part about it. Like brains offline, real hearts offline, real presence is offline. So we really have to be careful about those things. So noticing those, they can be really dangerous in that part of us. And that's why I said it's also important to notice, like that's where majority of culture is somewhere close to operating. So that's why I had to be careful. So if someone cuts me off, you know, I want to beat my horn, you know, it's something. I don't want somebody to have a hardcore instinctual response and do something crazy on the road. I'd be like, you know what? Maybe they just need to get to work quicker, or maybe it's an emergency. I'll just let it slide because I don't, you know, I don't want any problems like that. I don't want instincts going rogue or anything like that. So that's just really important to notice when our instincts do go a little wild. So the other part about it, and because when I teach instincts first before I teach types, subtypes, anything. I teach instincts first because I think until we notice them, we really don't understand the impact we're having on other people and ourselves. So as we understand in the Enneagram world, there's a dominant instinct and then there's a repressed instinct. So behind those instincts, though, we have a lot of information. So that dominant instinct is showing up way too often. It's showing up when it doesn't need to be there. You know, so that's something that we really have to work on. And I have exercises I work with my groups with that I do to really help them kind of manage that instinct and really start to notice it so it doesn't take over. But the drive to survive, one of the things that is very important when it is dominant is that I'm always feeling threatened. That instinct feels threatened. So I feel threatened. So if I'm operating in a way that feels like I'm in threat or always, then I'm doing things that are not going to always be beneficial or helpful for others around me, even myself to a certain degree. Even though it's self-protection for me, I'm doing things that could really be dangerous to other people because I don't really care. It's all about me. And so we really have to be careful because it's like my life is always threatened. Now, the flip side of the self-preservation repressed area, which can be really tricky, is that you start to think, my life's not important. And so if you know people who are repressed, who are self-pres repressed, you don't bring that same energy, that same vigor to make sure you're really taking care of yourself. And so this can be very detrimental and dangerous as well, right? If I don't feel like my life and myself is important, then I'm not doing things to really make sure my tank is full, make sure that I'm okay. Mentally, psychologically, physically, emotionally. I'm not really checking in and making sure these things are actually operating appropriately within myself, which affects all the other parts of us, as we all know, right? And then too, thinking about it from the social lens. So being socially dominant, like the distortion that social dominant instinct has is the fact that I must be known within a group to be somebody. So now my value, on top of the whole Enneagram thing, before we even get to our types, my value is all caught up in, do people know who I am? Am I somebody in this group of people? Do I have some type of positioning that honors who I am in this situation, right? And so they can lead to a lot of different complexes. If you study different areas, it's like, okay, that could mean this for that person, that can mean that. And then if we flip it and we talk about the repressed distortion, we talked about, I don't trust groups or causes. So now you have, potentially someone who literally doesn't trust groups of people, even good causes. It's a super questioning of them. It's like, I don't want to be part of them because this group probably did that, probably does this. And so that automatically right there can be harmful or detrimental. Sometimes what'll happen is, even when I'm teaching, if I have someone who's socially repressed in my group, the way they communicate in groups can kind of miss the social etiquette of what's going on. They can just say something and it'd be like, that was actually offensive. And I don't know if you knew that. And because they're not catching the social cues of what's happening. And so they're creating some abrasiveness that's going on, right? And if you're not able to catch that, or they're not able to catch it, they get a response that is usually like in response to their abrasion. And so now they're like, see, that's why I don't like groups. And so it just perpetuates this same cycle, right, that they can go on. So they have to be very careful, because that can happen. And we can think about that even with people in different groups around the world. Groups that bring harmony and try to bring community. There's people who are socially repressed who's like, I'm not gonna be a part of it. All of them do this. They're all a part of this. They all do that. And so they have to be careful, because you're not really exploring, but that instinct is taking over, or it's not showing up like it should, to be like, well, maybe this group does have some beneficial things, even though there are some things that we have to question and examine. And so then we look at the one-to-one, or the sexual, or the transmitting, whichever one you call it. The dominant distortion is that the other person is everything. Now, I am fully valuing the other person as being like the worth, and all of my time and energy has to be put on this person. Like that, they're what's valuable. So I need to make sure like I put all of my energy into making sure I examine and understand that their life is very important. So now that's another portion of I'm self-neglecting to a certain degree, because I'm putting all my energy into this person. And with one-to-one sexual transmitting, especially if you're dominant, you understand that there's a deep passion in there. So they can get lost into the other person that they are at that time really in touch with. So that also is a part that can be very tricky for them as well, because it's distorted. It just shows up too much. It's like, I don't need you to show up right now, but it's showing up like, let's do something, let's connect super, super deep. And it's like, okay, pause, relax. Now the repressed part is, I'm not like actually attractive or fascinating. If you're sexual, it's like, I'm not really that attractive or fascinating, and people probably shouldn't necessarily be with me. But see, that's a distortion of it not showing up when it should. And so we don't always recognize these messages, and we have a whole different narrative for the reasons why we do X, Y, Z, or we don't do this. But a big part of it is our instinct, the impact of our instinct being there or not being there, or showing up or not showing up, when it would be very healthy for it to show up, right? So obviously we have to do different things to work on it showing up. So something I do want to, I do want to share, I'm going to share screens really quickly. It's just a little bit of information on when I teach, because I want to make sure you have a visual as well. Want to make sure you have a visual. All right, so looking at this, these are some of the things that happen inside of our different instincts. And so we also get, the impact here is different, right? So for instance, a person who is self-pres dominant, they're going to communicate more practically. I'm definitely practical. I realized that was a gift. I didn't know that was a gift. That makes me a little bit different than other sevens who are social and sexual, or one-to-one, or transmitting, because I communicate in a way that's more practical, more down to earth. So I'm a little bit more grounded in the way that I operate and move around places, right? So I don't always come off as high seven buzzy a lot of times, okay? But also more private and self-reliant. These things are so important. And these things show up in our lives in ways that we don't realize. So imagine if you are self-pres repressed, and maybe privacy is not really a thing for you. You're just like, all your information kind of out there just a little bit, not everything, but you just kind of share. It's not a big deal. But what happens when you encounter someone who is self-pres and you want to have that communication to know more information, tell me more? Now that person is backing away, because they're like, oh, you want to know too much. I don't know you that well. I'm just going to push away from you. So we have these dynamics going on, because we have sexual types who are trying to really get to know someone, really want to get to know someone. But you may have a communication with a self-pres who's like moving away from the situation, like, oh, they're trying to get to know me. And then you have social, who's a little bit in between, like what's trendy, like what's going on right here, like, okay, this relationship is good now, but now I'm moving away, right? Or it's like, it wasn't cool then, but it's cool now, so now I'm paying attention to it. It has an impact on society, so I'm like looking into it now. So these different components of us actually impact us a whole lot, okay? When we look at the historical impacts of these instincts, and this is where it gets like, where I really study, dive down, get deep into, is because the historical impact has probably done the most damage out of anything. So let me share that with you really quickly. So when we talk about the historical impacts of, let's get past this part real quick, the historical impacts. So when we talk about self-preservation, this is what happens on a societal level when self-preservation is gone rogue. We get like definite war. And part of that is because I'm not considering what the other side is thinking about. I only care about my side. Oh my goodness. Self-preservation. I must survive. We must survive. And so we can get stuck in actually really thinking about, let's just start war. There's no other way. We must go into war with them because we have to make sure we're doing things just for us. Hunger or famine, privation, which is kind of all going together. I'm going to really make sure I have everything I need. So I may even take the food from someone else and not care at all, because it's all about me and what either my unit or my culture personally needs in this situation, if it's dominant. And then stealing. This is another part too. You think about when different parts and areas have gone kind of rogue, when self-preservation takes over, like stealing can happen, and it can be something that's very common because someone is like, just got to make sure I get what I get and I need my family. So we have to be very aware, like these things happen. And we're talking about not just, remember, we're looking at historical and societal things. I'm not just talking about small petty theft. I'm talking about large amounts of money being stolen. I'm talking about, even if you think about right now, the crypto market, like the cryptocurrency market is wild. I don't know, because there's not like any real regulation on it. And so you can get rich quick to a certain extent, but when people steal your cryptocurrency, there's not really any really reference or like place you can go for someone to go and like investigate it and actually get your money back. It's like gone for the most part. It's really hard. Like it is almost impossible to get your money back. So this is like these things happen, right? This is global type big scale. Now, when we look at social and navigating, so now we're already looking at bigger groups of people naturally, right? So we're talking about social. So it's going to include more people. So we have more things that show up though at the very same time. So social and navigating, and this is one of the first things that shows up that means a lot. Slavery. How can I create a system, like a social caste system to a certain degree, that makes sure that a certain group reaps the benefits of the work from someone else? I'm socially organizing something so that we can benefit from it. And this is the lower side when the instinct is going rogue. How can I organize this in a social way that'll make sure this system works so the people who want to benefit from it or are empowered can benefit from it, okay? Bigger than us. Torture, mass torture. We think about, we talk about what happened with Nazis and the Jewish community. Mass torture. How can I systemically, on a large level, create a social way that we actually torture people? We actually have places to torture people, and we have a system in place to make this happen. That is the social instinct gone rogue on a huge, large level, on a mass level, okay? On top of that, genocide. Think about this. I mean, this is a systematic way of approaching how do I eliminate a certain group of people. This is bigger than just us. Like this is big, right? This is big, okay? Subduing certain groups, imperialization. How do I go there and make them as I want them to be, as I see that they should be in this situation? How do I do that? you know? And so you go there and there's an exploitation piece to it. And there's a part of like, I'm going to adjust the way that you live and the way that you are to fit the way that I want you to fit and do the things I want you to do. Okay. And then inequality, as we all know. And then for physical and sexual abuse, when we think about sexual one-to-one on a mass level. So if you think about countries where sex trafficking is a normal thing, you think about physical abuse as a normal way of like, well, that's just a part of what they do. The culture has a very unfortunate lower end or unhealthy version of the instinct of sexual one-to-one or transmitting. So now you're getting where this is a normal thing. People are used to it as just a way of life or a way of avoiding different parts of life. It's not like a big thing like, oh, we got to do something about it. It's like, nope, that's how we operate here. Okay. And then you think about crimes of passion, and not just crimes of passion of like, I'm really mad at this person because they don't want to be with me, so I'm going to commit this crime. Think about even from the standpoint, if I can't have you, no one can have you. And so maybe it is on a mass level, taking out anyone that could be a part of what they're passionate about. Maybe not that person, but everything around them or something. Crimes of passion. And then even thinking about the homicide like rivalry thing. So if you think about gang violence, right? There's specific groups, right? Very specific. Even though they're groups, there's this rivalry with specific groups and people that I am frustrated with. And so I'm going to take it out in an extreme way on specific people who are passionately connected to you. Okay. So these are ways that it is like historically impacted cultures and the world, the globe. You know, like all these things have happened in the world, which have been tragedies, no doubt. So going on that, there's also another impact I want to speak on as well. There is a spiritual impact as well. And so when we talk about a spiritual impact of how am I like connecting to or with something that is spiritual, that is above me, that is more than I am, all these things have an impact as well. And so I'm going to share that part with you right now. Give me 1 second to get there. Okay. So there's a spiritual thing and a connection with that. So what I want to put here, I'm going ahead and put here. So for us who are self-pressed dominant, there's a part of us in the spiritual level that don't want to be left helpless. So there's a feeling when that instinct is awry, guess what? Because I don't feel that spiritual connection, if my instinct is gone rogue, then I must do for myself everything. There's a part of me that I must take care of it all, because guess what? Like the higher power, the universe, God, is not with me. So I must do it by myself. Okay. So we can get stuck in that realm. And then on top of that, self-pressed, repressed, you've left me unprotected. And I will remind you of this. And so there's a portion of I am going to suffer to a certain extent or not take care of it until you do something about it. I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to do this. I'm going to neglect myself until you do something about it. God, universe, spirit, whatever, which one is yours. It's like, I'm going to do that until someone does something about it. Okay. So these is when our instincts don't show up for the self-preservation. We have to be very aware of these things happening within us. The next component is our social instinct. And what happens here is the social dominant has to be careful, because remember, the distortion is I am someone if people know who I am. And so a part of that, when you talk about the spiritual component, there's a part of it that can actually start to feel like I am divine. I am kind of God in a sense, or the higher being, the superior being to a certain extent. We have to be careful when that instinct goes rogue. There's very specific types that really have to watch out for this, because it just blends in. It just blends in really well to where it really does give off this aura sometimes that I'm superior and that I am this way, right? Now, the reverse, self-pressed, repressed, social repressed, they have to be careful, because now that they reject groups, they reject bodies of people, they reject people in general being together, doing something good and collective together to move forward. Now it's like, God, the divine don't exist. Universe, that don't exist. No, I'm good. no, I'm good. Like, I don't see any benefit from that. So I'm just gonna have to tough it out alone with it myself. Like, no, I'm good. So that actually happens as well, because now I'm not a part of a group, something bigger than myself. I'm not even part of something bigger than myself as people, right? Let alone something that is more spiritual or bigger than me, greater than me. Not even that. Like, I'm not even involved with people as a bigger part of me, and actually being able to watch out for those things who can connect on a level that is community based. And then we're looking at the one-to-one sexual or transmitting, so many different words to describe this one. We're looking at sexual dominance. Don't leave me. I want to feel you with zeal. I want to feel your energy, right? It's like, so there's this component. Remember, it's already thinking to a certain extent that the other person is everything. So now, instead of having that connection with self and being able to go inside, they're looking for even this spiritual component within someone else, that zeal, that feeling within someone else to a degree, because there's a disconnection when that instinct is unhealthy and taking over their lives. Okay. And so if we flip that and look at the repressed version, you have a don't abandon me, I don't feel you anymore. So it is more of a please don't, but I don't feel that important. Like, it's like, I'm not important enough for you to want to connect with, to a certain degree. It's like, I'm here, but you don't really have to connect, because I don't think I'm just that important. And so these are areas that are extremely impactful to our lives if you really sit back and process and think on them. Very important to our lives.
Well, you've just scared us all. We're looking for people gone rogue at this very moment. We're writing down their names, and and they might be us. I asked you a question, Milton, and I hope that if you want to ask Milton a question, you'll raise your hand here in our last 10, 15 minutes here. But I said to Milton, during COVID, what I've noticed is everybody has been self-pres around whatever instinct they are. So they've either doubled down self-pres, or their self-pres is about one-to-one relationships, or their self-pres is about their social clubs. And so I just wonder how you all see this. How do you see, in the midst of global trauma, how has your own instinct been rogue? Or how has self-preservation even caused your instinct to become even, the monster from within, or, whatever. I think there's a really interesting, there's going to be a lot of interesting research that comes out of this time in history, what happened to people individually and collectively. And so I am dominant in style 3, and my dismissed childlike self is a 6. And so while Mario thinks I'm transmitting, and B thinks I'm social, and my husband thinks I'm self-pres, so that'll give you, okay. All I know is the self-preservation in me during this time has been in the lead around my social circles. Like, how can I keep them alive together? How is the church going to survive? How am I going to make sure that, there's still a place where people can come together, right? Or in the, the one-to-one, like my kids, my grandkids, oh my gosh, how are they surviving this? And are they going to survive this? And what do I need to do to help them? And so there's a lot of frenetic energy, ungrounded energy coming from the reptilian brain, right? Yes. That is, as you say, animalistic. So I wonder what questions you have for Milton, because when I asked him mine, he said, oh, what did you say, Milton?
Yeah, I was like, oh, that was a good question. I love the connection you were making around an instinct because of the environment actually strengthening your dominant instinct. I love that. I said, that is really great insight. And like you said, it is a frenetic time. And if you think about even the mass thing, right? Or people taking risk, imagine if you're a one-to-one sexual dominant and you want to see someone so bad and your self-pres is low, then you would take the risk maybe even before we had shots. It was like, I'm going to take the risk because I love them. I want to really get to know them. So like you said, this is operating at levels we don't really realize on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, I have a question.
Please, who's speaking?
That's Danielle.
Danielle, ask away.
Okay, so it's a part question, part statement. Milton, I wrote in the chat, get out my journal, because I feel as exposed as I did when I took my first Enneagram workshop with Chris Hewitt. I feel like my business is just out in the streets with the self-preservation type 1 that I am. So thank you. And also, please stop telling everybody what I'm going through. So the question that I have is, I went from being this very zealous, eager to share the gospel with the whole world young pastor to believing that there was no God and people were all horrible in 2000 and probably 16, 17, when I first started studying the Enneagram. And I've graduated even from that assumption. However, that self-preservation, that repressed self-preservation of, I don't want to deal with people at all. Everybody is out to get me. I'm going to withdraw into my 4, my little upset, very emotional 4, and just create this whole environment around my survival and my family's survival. So the quarantine has been actually really good for me. I've really enjoyed all the curbside amenities and not having to deal with people as much. But what I want to ask you is, what practices would you suggest as the world is opening up, as I'm now being invited to come and teach and, assume this leadership role that I know I'm destined to continue to unfold and transform with? What are some practices that will help me to appropriately engage my self-preservation instinct that helps me to become a little more, go back to my 7 and really enjoy people, and even enjoy how religion and wisdom traditions do help and serve us in a time like this?
Oh my goodness, this is good. So this is something that you're all going to get. This is like a sneak peek of what I do in my course, but also something I learned from You Run Your Pious. And it is to understand that like that dominant instinct is animalistic, right? So visualize an animal that represents your dominant instinct. So for me, I have a German Shepherd because like it can be really aggressive, right? It is one of the dogs to be really aggressive. It can be athletic. It can go after what it wants. Like it can be tenacious. But if I tame it, if I really teach and manage it, then I have the ability to have more control. So what I mean by visualize it. So come up with your animal. And I've heard some people come up with some really interesting animals. I'm not going to say like I had some sexual force come up with some really interesting animals, by the way. I was like, is that even a real animal? But what you do is you visualize that animal and you visualize it calming down. What do you need to do to have that actual part of yourself actually calm down? So for me, when my German Shepherd is like biting real hard to do something self-pres like that is usually for me very selfish, to be honest. I really visualize my German Shepherd sitting down first and then laying down. I'm like, lay down. People won't notice I'm doing this, but I will like beside me be petting my visualized German Shepherd because I have to be like, okay, calm that part of you down. Let's work with it because if it takes over, I promise you, I will do something extremely selfish just for me, and it will not include anybody else. So I really have to watch out for it because it operates in so many small pieces, even around friends.
Okay, so I'm gonna work with my Black Panther and calm her down and have her climb up in her tree and lay on her branch when she wants to go and scratch and claw at everybody. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Welcome. That's awesome. Love that.
So good. So good. Any other hands raised? Teresa.
Hi, Milton. Great to meet you. I have a question. Yeah, I've got so much exploring to do around my instinct, but and what I thought And I'm sure you're familiar with Mario's work of like how you have one dominant, and you talked about repressed. Do you see that? Because I feel I'm kind of like Claire. I feel like I can see all three. I like that full circle part of things. I feel like I probably am in that transmitting part, but then my second would be self-pres. Like I go back and forth between the two. Can you say more about like, is one more dominant and then there's like a second go-to, if that makes sense?
Yeah. When it comes to that, and that's part that I'm still exploring too, because I've seen people, because of their experiences in life, where it has shifted. Like they've had like these moments that really have kind of shifted their top two, I guess I would say. And so what I really think is that, especially depending on the situation we are in, which one comes out the most. And so I'm also, to add to that, I'm thinking about like, if you look at which one shows up in a way that's the most detrimental or harmful to you in a situation, to think about that one being the dominant one. Which one shows up the most in a detrimental way? As crazy as that sounds. Because if you have those two that are kind of operating, I guess simultaneously at times, and depending where you are, this one may come out more, right? Just to look at it, which one may be doing that, may be the dominant one.
So maybe this is work for you and Claire to explore together. I'm serious here,
Okay.
because I see the three centers of intelligence, and that Claire teaches through the motions of the soul work that she does, the harmony of where do the instincts come into that harmony, because I see my, say, self-pres show up in my loyalty, because I too see that as my dismissed part is my 6. I'm a 3, with a 4 wing and 3, 6, 9 harmony. So, I'm trying to think like, and maybe I'm thinking way too far out of the box, but I just see my self-pres in my 9 or in my 6. And maybe it's due to some PTSD or trauma. I don't know. I mean, there's layers to all of this, right? But I wonder what there is to explore with how the instincts and harmony go together.
Yeah, well, I think that's great work for you to do. And I do. And it is something that when I worked with Beatrice with the instincts during COVID, those are the things I found to do during COVID. Who else can I study with so I can ignore the pain I'm feeling? So I think there is this reality of the dynamics of the Enneagram, the robustness of the Enneagram. And I do think there's a lot of overlap. And even what you're talking about, that could this be about what I've dismissed? Or Ginger really laid a big one on us at the end of our training this last time, and talked about that there are no wings, and that, there really is just, you have the 2 numbers on either side of you that you've been trying to resolve. And that's how you became you. And I love that definition.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. It's not hers. It actually came from Bob Oakes in Toronto in the 70s. But so I just want to say this, all models are incomplete and some are helpful, to quote Scott Lowridge. All models are incomplete, some are helpful. And then I also love what Ginger said this last time, Milton, I bet you did too. Is it true or is it helpful? And I think sometimes like a parable might not be true. It's just a story, but it's helpful. And sometimes it's true, but it's not helpful. So, I think those are the questions we ask ourselves. Is this true or is it helpful? How is it helping me see? As Danielle said, you just read my journal, So clearly it was both helpful and true. And then she can discover how helpful it'll be. I think what we want to say is that this was a master class. This was a classic head type when we invite head types to come. We don't, as Orion always says, just give Jerry 2 hours, because he just gets into it. And then we want another hour for question asking. So I totally get that. So we'll bring you back, Milton, if you're so inclined. And we want to invite everyone to, Milton's podcast, which is called Do It for the Gram. And also he has a 12-week Enneagram course coming up in August. And you can take a look at that as well to see if that's a fit for you or someone you care about, or someone you really want to see get fixed, and you can send them to Milton. And then also, his website is there as well, and the Kazan Careers Academy. Oh my gosh, there's so much there. It's beautiful. And so we want to say thank you, Milton. We want to say, from my faith tradition and from my dominant instinct, may God bless you and keep you, and make God's face shine upon you and give you peace.
Thank you.
Yeah, and will you keep bringing your brilliant intellect to the world, so that you can make us curious and frustrate us and say, stop looking at my journal and all of that good stuff. So we're going to go around the circle, and we're only going to say one word, everybody, a blessing for Milton, or something that you received from Milton. Not a sentence, not a phrase, just one word to say to Milton what you received or what you'd like to bless him with. And my final word is imagination.
Wow.
Curiosity.
Value.
Insight.
Informed.
Picture.
Enriched.
Hopeful.
Oh.
Expand.
And Rosemary, you were not unmuted when you said your one word. Maybe you can type it in the chat, sister. Anyone else before we
Creativity. Did you get it? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Creativity.
got it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. You're an awesome group to be with. We're not going to be meeting in July because we're going to the global conference, and then we'll be back together in August with Jerome Loughrige, the neuroscience guy, and the Enneagram. He's going to talk about the Enneagram brain. So don't miss that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.